Let me ask you something. You just got your first beehive. You spent weeks researching, watching videos, reading forums. You finally ordered your bees, set up the hive, and now they are actually in there, living, working, buzzing. And what do you want to do? Look inside, every single day. I get it. I completely get it. When I first started beekeeping, I was the same way. The hive felt like a mystery box, and I was convinced that if I didn't check it constantly, something terrible would happen without me noticing. What if the queen died? What if they're running out of food? What if there's a disease spreading right now and I'm just sitting here doing nothing? So I opened it. Again, and again, and again. And that's exactly how I almost destroyed my first colony before summer even started. Here's the truth that nobody puts in the headline. Most beginner beekeepers don't lose their hives because they did too little. They lose them because they did too much. And mistake number one, the one that silently damages thousands of colonies every single year, is opening the hive too often. Today, we are breaking down the 5 biggest mistakes new beekeepers make. Not the obvious stuff you already read about, the real mistakes. The ones that cost you money, cost you colonies, and cost you months of progress. By the end of this video, you will know exactly what to stop doing and what to do instead. Let's get into it. Before we call this a mistake, let's be honest about why it happens. You're new. You don't yet have the experience to know what normal looks like inside a hive. So every time you open it, you're looking for reassurance. You want to see the queen. You want to see eggs. You want to see capped brood and filled frames, and bees moving calmly, and everything looking exactly like the pictures in the book. And when you're not sure what you saw, or you didn't find the queen, you close the hive up and start thinking, maybe I should check again in 2 days. Just to make sure. This is completely understandable. It is also genuinely harmful to your bees. Here is what is actually happening inside the hive every time you open it. A healthy beehive is a finely tuned biological system. The bees inside maintain a very specific internal environment, and they work constantly to keep it stable. Temperature is the first thing to understand. The brood nest, which is the area where eggs, larvae, and capped brood are developing, is kept at a remarkably precise temperature, between 93 and 95 degrees Fahrenheit, or 34 to 35 degrees Celsius. The bees achieve this through a combination of clustering together for warmth, fanning to circulate air, and in hot weather, bringing in water to cool the hive through evaporation. This is not a rough estimate. This is a biological requirement. Bee larvae that develop at the wrong temperature can hatch with deformities. The queen's egg-laying can be disrupted. The entire development cycle of the colony can be thrown off. Every time you open the hive, that temperature drops. Depending on the outside conditions, the bees may need anywhere from 20 minutes to several hours to fully restore the internal temperature to the correct level. In spring or autumn, when ambient temperatures are already low, this recovery takes even longer and puts real stress on the colony. But temperature is just the beginning. When you open a hive, you are also disrupting the chemical communication system that holds the entire colony together. Bees communicate primarily through pheromones. The queen produces what is called queen substance, a complex mix of chemical signals that tells every bee in the colony that the queen is present, that she is healthy, and that the colony is functioning normally. This signal flows through the hive constantly, passed from bee to bee through physical contact and through the air. The moment you open the hive, this chemical environment is disturbed. Fresh air rushes in and dilutes the pheromone signals. The bees go into a mild alarm state. Guard bees release alarm pheromone, which smells like bananas to some people, and this puts the whole colony on edge. Some bees abandon their tasks and move toward the perceived threat. Others cluster around the queen to protect her. The normal workflow of the hive is interrupted. After you close up and walk away, it takes time for the colony to settle back into its rhythm. The pheromone environment needs to stabilize. The bees need to return to their jobs. The queen needs to resume laying. If you come back and open the hive again 2 days later, you are interrupting that recovery process before it is complete. Now imagine doing this every 3 days, week after week, for an entire season. You are not helping your bees. You are constantly resetting them. And a colony that spends its energy recovering from inspections is a colony that is not spending that energy on what it actually needs to do: raising brood, building comb, collecting nectar and pollen, preparing for winter. And there is one more thing that over-inspecting does that most beginners do not think about at all. It trains the bees to be defensive. Bees learn, not in the way humans learn, but colonies do develop behavioral patterns over time based on repeated experience. A colony that is opened frequently, especially when the beekeeper is nervous and moving quickly and squishing bees accidentally with the frames, learns that the hive is not a safe and stable place. It becomes more defensive. It starts to react with more aggression to disturbance. And then the beekeeper, now getting stung more often, decides they need to open the hive more carefully, which means more often, which makes the bees even more defensive. This is a cycle that breaks a lot of beginners. They end up with bees they are afraid of, and bees that are difficult to work with, and they do not realize that they themselves created this situation by opening the hive too much. If you are nodding along to any of this, if you recognize yourself in what I am describing, I want you to do one thing right now. Drop a comment below and tell me how often you were inspecting your hive when you first started. Just be honest. You will be amazed how many people are in the exact same situation. And if you are finding this video useful so far, hit that like button. It genuinely helps this channel reach more beekeepers who need this information. So what is the right answer? How often should you actually be inspecting your hive? The general rule that experienced beekeepers follow is once every 7 to 10 days during the active season. That is it. Once a week, maybe a little less. This interval is not arbitrary. It is based on the biology of the colony. The queen lays eggs that take 21 days to develop into adult worker bees. The critical window for spotting problems, like a failing queen or early signs of disease, is roughly every week. If you inspect every 7 to 10 days, you will not miss anything important. You will catch problems before they become crises, and you will give the colony enough uninterrupted time to actually function normally between your visits. There are exceptions, of course. If you have a specific reason to check, a swarm alert, a known disease issue, a queen you just introduced, then yes, open the hive. But curiosity alone is not a reason. Anxiety alone is not a reason. The bees do not need you to check on them. They need you to trust them. Here is a practical thing you can do right now if you are struggling with the urge to over-inspect. Keep a hive journal. Write down the date of every inspection, what you saw, and what you decided to do about it. Then physically write the date of your next planned inspection on the page. Having that written commitment makes it real. It gives you something to hold yourself to. And over time, your journal becomes an incredibly valuable record of your colony's development through the seasons. The other thing that helps is learning to read the outside of the hive. You do not need to open a hive to know a lot about what is happening inside. Bees coming and going with pollen is a strong sign that there is a laying queen inside, because bees only collect pollen when there is brood to feed. Heavy traffic at the entrance means the colony is active and the nectar flow is on. Bees clustering on the outside of the hive in warm weather is normal and does not require an inspection. Learning to observe before you intervene is one of the most important skills a beekeeper can develop, and it starts with simply watching. We are just getting started. In the next section of this video, we're going to talk about mistake number 2, which is something almost every beginner gets wrong in the first month, and which can make your inspections genuinely dangerous for both you and your bees. Stay with me, because this one surprises a lot of people. Let me ask you something before we get into mistake number 2. Have you ever opened your hive, lit your smoker, given a few puffs, and still ended up running away from angry bees? Or maybe the opposite. You were so scared of upsetting them that you barely used the smoker at all, and the inspection turned into a nightmare anyway. If either of those sounds familiar, you are not alone. Mistake number 2 is one of the most universal problems in beginner beekeeping, and it is not about whether you use smoke. It is about how you use it, why it works, and what you are actually trying to achieve when you pick up that smoker. Most beginners treat the smoker like a magic wand. You wave it around a bit, hope for the best, and pray the bees stay calm. And when it does not work, the assumption is usually that something is wrong with the bees. They are aggressive, they are a bad breed, they need to be requeened. But in the majority of cases, the bees are fine. The smoker technique is the problem. Let's fix that right now. First, let's talk about what smoke actually does inside the hive, because once you understand the biology, everything about proper technique starts to make sense. Bees, as we talked about in the first part of this video, communicate almost entirely through chemical signals, through pheromones. The most important alarm signal in a colony is a pheromone called isoamyl acetate, which is released by bees near the entrance and by bees that are being crushed or agitated. It spreads through the hive rapidly and tells every bee in the colony that there is a threat. When that signal spreads, bees become defensive. They orient toward the source of the disturbance. They sting. They release even more alarm pheromone when they sting, which recruits more bees to sting, which is why a single sting can very quickly turn into many stings if you do not manage the situation correctly. Smoke interrupts this process. When bees detect smoke, something very specific happens at the biological level. The smoke triggers an ancient instinct that is deeply hardwired into every honeybee on the planet. The bees perceive the smoke as a signal that the forest is on fire. And their immediate response to that threat is not to fight, it is to eat. Bees gorge themselves on honey when they detect smoke, because in the wild, if the forest is burning, the colony may need to abscond, to completely abandon the hive and fly away to find a new home. Before they do that, they need to carry as much food energy as possible. So they fill their honey stomachs to capacity. A bee with a full honey stomach is physically less able to sting. The mechanics of stinging require the bee to curl its abdomen, and a fully distended honey stomach makes that movement more difficult. But more importantly, a bee that is focused on eating is not focused on defending. The alarm response is chemically suppressed. The bees become, for a window of time, more concerned with their own survival preparation than with attacking you. This is what smoke actually does. It does not calm bees in a gentle, soothing way. It triggers a survival response that temporarily overrides the defensive response. Understanding this changes how you think about using it. Now, with that biology in mind, let's talk about the mistakes beginners make with the smoker. The first and most common mistake is not getting the smoker lit properly before starting the inspection. A smoker that goes out halfway through an inspection is worse than no smoker at all. You have already disturbed the colony. The bees are starting to get agitated, and suddenly you have no smoke to manage the situation. This is when inspections go badly wrong. A properly lit smoker should produce cool, white smoke continuously for the entire duration of your inspection, which, for a standard hive, might be 20 to 30 minutes. To achieve this, you need the right fuel and the right technique. Good smoker fuels include burlap, wood chips, dried herbs like lavender or thyme, compressed cotton, or untreated natural twine. Avoid anything synthetic, anything treated with chemicals, or anything that produces hot, dark smoke. The smoke that contacts your bees should be cool enough that you can hold your hand in it without discomfort. Hot smoke agitates bees and can physically harm them. To light the smoker correctly, start with a small amount of easily ignitable material at the bottom. Dry grass or crumpled newspaper works well as a starter. Get that burning well, then begin adding your main fuel gradually while pumping the bellows to push air through. The key is to build a deep, smoldering fuel bed that will sustain itself. Pack the fuel in loosely enough that air can flow through it, but densely enough that it does not burn too fast. Once you have good smoke coming out, add a little more fuel on top and close the lid. Pump the bellows every minute or two during the inspection to keep it going. Before you even approach the hive, your smoker should already be producing steady, cool, white smoke. Give it 5 minutes after lighting to make sure it is stable. Do not walk up to your hive with a smoker that you are still trying to get lit. That is a recipe for problems. The second major mistake is using too much smoke. This is counterintuitive because most beginners think more smoke means calmer bees. But flooding a hive with smoke causes a different kind of panic. The bees become disoriented. The queen may stop laying. The brood can be negatively affected if the smoke is excessive and hot. And the bees, rather than calmly gorging on honey, start to behave erratically because the signal they are receiving is overwhelming rather than manageable. The correct amount of smoke is much less than most beginners use. Before you open the hive, give 2 or 3 gentle puffs at the entrance. Let the smoke drift into the hive naturally. Wait about 30 seconds. This gives the smoke time to spread through the colony and trigger that gorging response before you start disturbing things. Then, when you lift the outer cover, give 1 or 2 puffs under the cover before you remove it fully. When you lift the inner cover, give 1 or 2 puffs across the top bars. During the inspection itself, use smoke sparingly and only when needed. If bees start to orient toward you, which means they are flying up and hovering near your face and hands in a focused way, give a puff or 2 near the area where you are working. If a bee stings your glove, immediately puff some smoke over that spot to mask the alarm pheromone before it spreads. But do not puff smoke constantly throughout the inspection just to feel like you are doing something. Less is more. If you are finding this useful and you want to keep learning real practical beekeeping, go ahead and subscribe right now. Every week on this channel, we cover exactly this kind of information, the stuff that actually makes a difference when you are standing in front of your hive. Hit the subscribe button and you will not miss a single video. The third mistake with smoke is the timing and the angle. Many beginners puff smoke directly down onto the frames, which drives bees down but also agitates the ones at the bottom of the hive. Better technique is to puff smoke across the top bars at a low angle so it drifts down gently rather than blasting the bees from above. Think of it as guiding the bees rather than pushing them. Timing matters too. The smoke needs time to work. If you puff at the entrance and immediately start prying the cover off, you have not given the colony time to respond to the signal. Those 30 seconds of waiting feel like nothing when you are used to them, but they make a real difference in how the bees behave during your inspection. There is also the question of what to do when smoke stops working. Sometimes, on certain days, bees are simply more defensive regardless of what you do. High humidity, a storm approaching, a nectar dearth, midday heat, all of these factors affect how bees respond to inspections. Experienced beekeepers know that some days you close the hive up, come back another time, and try again. If your bees are becoming extremely defensive despite good smoke technique and calm movements on your part, that is information. It might mean the colony is queenless, or that they are under stress from disease or a dearth of food. It is worth paying attention to. But it is almost never a reason to panic. One more thing on this topic that nobody talks about enough. Your own behavior matters as much as the smoke. Bees are extraordinarily sensitive to movement and vibration. Fast, jerky movements near the hive trigger defensive responses. Dropping a frame, banging the hive body, moving quickly when a bee lands on you, all of these things escalate the situation faster than almost anything else. Learn to move slowly and deliberately. When a bee lands on your hand, resist the urge to shake it off. Move your hand slowly away from the hive and let the bee leave on her own. When you pull frames, do it smoothly and steadily with both hands. When you set frames down, place them gently. Your calm communicates to the bees almost as effectively as the smoke does. Beekeeping is a practice of patience, and nowhere is that more obvious than in the way you handle your smoker and your body during an inspection. In the next part of this video, we are moving on to mistake number 3, and I will be direct with you. This one is the most expensive mistake on this list. It is the mistake that kills entire colonies, sometimes multiple colonies in the same apiary, sometimes within a single season. And the worst part is that most beginners do not even know they are making it until it is too late. Do not skip the next section. Let's talk about Varroa mites. If you have been in beekeeping for more than 5 minutes, you have heard the name, Varroa destructor. And yes, that is the actual scientific name, destructor. The people who named it were not being dramatic, they were being accurate. Varroa is a parasitic mite that feeds on developing bee larvae and on adult bees. It is tiny, about the size of a pinhead, reddish-brown in color, and almost impossible to see without looking carefully. And it is, without any exaggeration, the single biggest threat to managed honeybee colonies in the world today. Here is the mistake beginners make. They hear about Varroa, they think, okay, I'll keep an eye on it, and then they do nothing. They do not monitor. They do not treat. They wait until they can see a problem with their own eyes. And by the time the problem is visible, it is almost always too late. This is the mistake that costs people entire colonies. Sometimes everything they built over a whole season. Let me explain why Varroa is so dangerous, because understanding the biology makes it impossible to ignore. Varroa mites reproduce inside capped brood cells. A female mite enters a brood cell just before it is capped, hides under the larva, and once the cell is sealed, she begins laying eggs. Her offspring, both male and female, mature inside the cell alongside the developing bee. They feed on the bee larva. When the adult bee emerges, the mated female mites emerge with her and immediately start looking for new cells to infest. This reproductive cycle means that Varroa populations inside a hive grow exponentially. In spring, when your colony starts expanding rapidly and there is a lot of capped brood, the mite population explodes. By late summer, a colony that started the season with a manageable mite load can be completely overwhelmed. And here is the part that makes it even worse. Varroa does not just weaken bees physically by feeding on them. It also transmits viruses. Deformed wing virus is the most well-known. Bees infected with this virus emerge from their cells with crumpled, useless wings. They cannot fly. They cannot forage. They are essentially born broken. A colony with high Varroa levels will start producing more and more of these deformed bees as the season progresses, and the colony's population collapses faster than it can recover. If you have never lost a colony to Varroa, count yourself lucky. And then go check your mite levels, because the fact that you have not lost one yet does not mean your mites are not there. So how do you actually monitor for Varroa? There are 2 main methods that beekeepers use, and both are straightforward enough for complete beginners. The first is the alcohol wash. You collect a sample of about 300 worker bees from the brood nest, which is roughly half a cup of bees. You put them in a jar with isopropyl alcohol, seal it, and shake vigorously for about a minute. The alcohol kills the bees and dislodges any mites attached to them. You then pour the liquid through a fine mesh strainer into a white container and count the mites. You divide the number of mites by 3 to get your mite count per 100 bees. This is your infestation rate. The second method is the sugar roll, which does not kill the bees. You collect the same size sample, roll them in powdered sugar, shake them over a white surface, and count the mites that fall off. The sugar roll is less accurate than the alcohol wash because it does not dislodge all mites, but it is a good option if you are not comfortable sacrificing bees for the test. Now, what number should concern you? The threshold that most experienced beekeepers and researchers use is 3 mites per 100 bees. If your count is at 3 or above, you need to treat. Do not wait. Do not tell yourself it will probably be fine. Treat. If you want to keep getting honest, practical information like this every week, hit the like button right now. It takes 1 second, and it helps this channel reach more beekeepers who need it. And subscribe if you have not already, because next week, we are going into a full video on Varroa treatment options with real numbers and real results. There are several treatment options available, and which one is right for you depends on the time of year, whether there is honey on the hive that you plan to eat, and what is available in your country. Oxalic acid is one of the most widely used treatments among small-scale and hobbyist beekeepers. It is a naturally occurring organic acid that is highly effective against Varroa and leaves no harmful residue in honey. In winter, when the colony has no capped brood, a single oxalic acid treatment by vaporization or dribble method can knock out the vast majority of mites in the hive. During the season, vaporized oxalic acid can be applied in multiple treatments over several weeks to manage mite levels in colonies that have brood present. Formic acid is another organic option. It works differently from oxalic acid in that it can penetrate capped brood cells and kill mites that are actively reproducing. This makes it more effective during the brood season. It requires careful use because it can harm bees and the queen if applied incorrectly or during high temperatures. Synthetic treatments like Apivar, which contains amitraz, are also available and widely used. They are effective but require strict adherence to instructions and should not be used when honey supers are on the hive. The most important thing is not which treatment you choose. The most important thing is that you monitor regularly and treat when the threshold is reached. Every experienced beekeeper has a monitoring schedule. They test in spring when the colony is building up, they test in midsummer when mite populations are peaking, and they treat before the bees that will carry the colony through winter are being raised, which is late summer. Those winter bees are critical. If they emerge from mite-infested cells, they are weakened before winter even begins, and the colony will not survive. Do not make the mistake of treating once and considering the problem solved. Varroa management is a seasonal practice, not a one-time event. It is part of keeping bees, just like inspections and feeding. Accept it, plan for it, and your colonies will be dramatically healthier for it. Feeding your bees sounds simple. You give them food when they need it. How complicated can it be? Pretty complicated, as it turns out. Mistake number 4 is one that beginners make with the best intentions, and that is exactly what makes it so frustrating. You are trying to help your bees. You are giving them food, and somehow you are still hurting them. Let's sort this out once and for all. First, let's establish something basic. Bees are not dependent on beekeepers for food. In a healthy environment with sufficient forage, a strong colony will feed itself just fine. Your job as a beekeeper is not to feed them constantly. Your job is to recognize the specific situations where supplemental feeding is genuinely necessary, and then to do it correctly. There are 4 main situations where feeding makes sense. When you install a new package or nucleus colony and they need resources to build comb and establish themselves. When your colony is heading into winter with insufficient honey stores. When there is a prolonged nectar dearth in summer and the colony is at risk of starving. And when you are raising queens or stimulating early spring buildup intentionally. Outside of these situations, feeding is usually unnecessary and can sometimes cause real problems. Let's go through the most common feeding mistakes one by one. The first mistake is feeding sugar syrup at the wrong concentration for the wrong purpose. Most beekeepers know that you feed bees sugar syrup, but many do not know that the concentration of that syrup matters enormously, depending on what you are trying to achieve. Thin syrup, which is a 1-to-1 ratio of sugar to water by weight, is used in spring and early summer. It is light and watery, which mimics incoming nectar, and it stimulates the colony to raise brood and build comb. When bees receive thin syrup, their instinct is to treat it like a nectar flow is happening. They ramp up brood production. They start drawing out new comb. This is exactly what you want when you are building up a new colony in spring. Thick syrup, which is a 2-to-1 ratio of sugar to water by weight, is used in late summer and autumn to build up winter stores. It is denser, closer to the consistency of ripened honey, and bees process it more efficiently for storage. When you are preparing a colony for winter, thick syrup is what you use. The mistake beginners make is using thin syrup in autumn, thinking they are helping their bees stock up for winter. Thin syrup has too high a water content. The bees have to work extremely hard to evaporate the excess moisture before they can cap it for storage. In cool autumn temperatures, when the colony is already slowing down and the ventilation is reduced, this excess moisture can cause real problems. It contributes to fermentation in the cells, raises humidity inside the hive, and can lead to condensation issues during winter. Use the right concentration at the right time of year. The second mistake is feeding during a nectar flow. This one surprises a lot of beginners. If there is food available outside, why would feeding inside the hive cause a problem? Here is what happens. When you add syrup to a hive during an active nectar flow, the bees do not know the difference between the syrup and the natural nectar at first. They process it and store it. The problem is that it takes up space. If your honey supers are on and the bees are bringing in real nectar from outside, the last thing you want is to have frames filling up with syrup instead. Worse, if the bees store syrup in frames that end up in your honey super, that syrup will be mixed in with your honey harvest. It will dilute the quality, affect the flavor, and in some regions it can create legal issues if you are selling honey that is supposed to be 100% from natural nectar. Check whether there is an active nectar flow before you feed. Watch your hive entrance. Are bees coming back heavily loaded with pollen? Is the hive weight increasing noticeably? Is there fresh, uncapped nectar in the frames when you inspect? If yes, put the feeder away. Your bees do not need it right now. The third mistake is feeding in winter. This is one that comes from a genuinely good place. A beekeeper checks their colony in January, worries that they might be running low on stores, and decides to put some syrup in to help them through. Unfortunately, this can do more harm than good. Bees in winter cannot properly process liquid syrup. At low temperatures, their digestive systems slow significantly. Liquid syrup is difficult for them to concentrate and store in cold conditions, and the additional moisture it introduces into the hive raises humidity levels inside the cluster. High humidity in a winter hive is dangerous. It promotes the growth of mold. It can cause the cluster to chill if bees get wet, and it creates conditions where disease spreads more easily. If you need to feed a colony in winter because their stores are genuinely critically low, the correct approach is to use solid or semi-solid food. Candy boards, which are made from fondant or hard sugar, can be placed directly above the cluster. The bees consume them slowly as needed, without the moisture problem that syrup creates. Dry sugar placed on newspaper above the frames is another option that many beekeepers use successfully. These methods give the bees emergency calories without introducing the humidity problem. The real lesson here is that winter feeding should be a last resort, not a routine. The time to make sure your colony has enough stores is in late summer and early autumn before you close them up for winter. A full colony going into winter needs roughly 60 to 80 pounds of honey, or the equivalent in sugar stores, depending on your climate. Weigh your hives or assess your frames carefully before winter. If they are short, feed heavily with thick syrup in September. Do not wait until January to discover the problem. And if you are picking up useful things from this video, please share it with another beekeeper who might need it. Drop it in a beekeeping group. Send it to a friend who just started out. The more people who have access to accurate information, the healthier our bee populations will be. And leave a comment below telling me what feeding mistake you made when you first started. I read every single comment, and I learn from your experiences just as much as you learn from mine. The fourth feeding mistake is relying on pollen substitute incorrectly. Pollen is not just food for adult bees. It is the primary protein source for raising brood. Without adequate pollen, a colony cannot raise healthy larvae, cannot produce royal jelly, and cannot develop young bees with properly functioning immune systems. In late winter and very early spring, before natural pollen sources are available, colonies can become pollen stressed, and this is when a good quality pollen substitute genuinely helps. The mistake is using low-quality substitutes or using them at the wrong time. A good pollen substitute should contain at least 20% crude protein and should be made from ingredients that bees will actually accept and consume. Many commercial pollen patties are effective. Some cheaper products are not, and bees will simply ignore them. If you put a pollen patty in your hive in early spring and the bees are not touching it after a week, it is worth trying a different product. Do not use pollen substitute when natural pollen is already abundantly available. The bees will prefer real pollen every time, and an ignored patty sitting in the hive becomes a breeding ground for small hive beetles and mold. Feeding is a tool. Like any tool, it works brilliantly when used correctly and causes problems when misused. Know why you are feeding. Know what you are feeding. Know when to stop. That is the whole formula. Coming up in Part 5, we're talking about equipment. Specifically, the expensive mistakes that beginners make when buying gear and the surprisingly simple things that are actually worth spending money on. This one will save you real money if you are just starting out. Let's talk about money for a minute. When most people get into beekeeping, they go one of two ways. Either they try to buy everything at once, the full professional setup, the expensive suit, the fancy hive, the electric uncapping knife, all of it, before they have even seen the inside of a hive. Or they go the opposite direction and try to spend as little as possible on everything, buying the cheapest version of every single item and then wondering why nothing works the way it should. Both approaches cost you more in the long run than doing it right from the start. And mistake number 5 is exactly this: making the wrong decisions about equipment early on, in either direction. Let me break this down practically, because I want you to walk away from this section with a clear picture of what actually matters and what does not. The first and most important piece of equipment you will ever buy as a beekeeper is your protective gear, specifically your suit and your veil. And this is one area where buying cheap is a genuine mistake that has real physical consequences. A low-quality veil that does not seal properly around your face and neck is not just uncomfortable, it is dangerous. One bee getting inside your veil during an inspection is enough to ruin the entire experience, and for some people, cause a serious allergic reaction. Cheap suits often have weak seams, poor quality zippers, and veils that gap at the connection point between the hood and the suit. These gaps are where bees get in. You do not need to buy the most expensive suit on the market, but you do need to buy a suit from a reputable supplier with solid reviews from real beekeepers. Look for double-stitched seams, a good quality zipper on the veil attachment, and elastic at the wrists and ankles that actually holds. A decent beginner suit from a reliable brand will cost you somewhere between $80 and $150, and it will last you years if you take care of it. That is money well spent. Gloves are a separate conversation. Many experienced beekeepers actually recommend that beginners start with nitrile disposable gloves or thin rubber gloves, rather than the thick leather beekeeping gloves you see in every starter kit. Here is why. Thick leather gloves reduce your tactile sensitivity dramatically. You cannot feel what you are doing with the frames. You are more likely to roll bees accidentally, which means more stings, more alarm pheromone, more defensive behavior from the colony. Thin gloves let you feel the frames, move more carefully, and actually handle the bees more gently, despite offering less physical protection. Yes, you might get stung through them occasionally, but the trade-off in control and sensitivity is worth it for most people as they are learning. Now let's talk about the hive itself, because this is where beginners make the most expensive mistakes. The most common hive type in North America and much of the English-speaking world is the Langstroth hive, and for good reason. It is the most widely used, which means parts are standardized and interchangeable, equipment is widely available, and there is more information, more resources, and more experienced beekeepers you can ask for advice about Langstroth hives than any other system. If you are just starting out, use a Langstroth. Do not complicate your life with a top bar hive or a Varroa hive before you understand the basics. Learn the fundamentals first, then experiment with alternative systems if you want to. Within the Langstroth system, the mistake beginners make is buying the wrong size boxes. There are 3 common sizes of Langstroth box: the deep, the medium, and the shallow. Many beginner kits come with 2 deep brood boxes and then shallow supers for honey storage. This is a functional setup, but it creates one significant problem. Full deep boxes are extremely heavy. A deep Langstroth box full of honey and brood can weigh 60 to 80 pounds. For many beekeepers, especially those who are smaller in stature or who have back issues, lifting and manipulating these boxes during inspections becomes a genuine physical problem. A growing number of experienced beekeepers now run all medium hive setups, using medium boxes for both the brood nest and honey storage. Medium boxes max out at around 50 pounds when completely full, which is much more manageable. The trade-off is that you need more boxes to achieve the same total volume, but the ergonomic benefit is significant over a long beekeeping career. Think about this before you buy, because retrofitting your setup later costs money. If you are learning something new in every part of this video, now is a great time to subscribe. This channel is built around exactly this kind of practical, honest information for beekeepers at every level. Hit the subscribe button so you never miss a video, and leave a comment below telling me what piece of equipment you wish you had bought differently when you started. Your experience might save someone else from making the same mistake. The smoker is another piece of equipment where quality genuinely matters. A cheap smoker with a poorly fitting bellows and a thin firebox will frustrate you every single time you use it. The bellows will crack, the firebox will rust through, the lid hinge will break. You will spend more time fighting with your equipment than focusing on your bees. A good quality smoker from a reliable manufacturer costs between $30 and $60 and will last you a decade or more with basic maintenance. Clean it out after every use. Do not let old ash and creosote build up, and it will serve you reliably for years. Frames and foundation are another area where beginners tend to go wrong, usually by buying the cheapest option available. Foundation is the thin sheet of wax or plastic that sits inside each frame and gives the bees a guide for building comb. Low-quality wax foundation is often made from blended or recycled wax that may contain contaminants. It can be brittle, difficult to install, and the bees sometimes simply refuse to draw it out properly. Good quality beeswax foundation from a reputable supplier costs more, but gives you much better results. Alternatively, many beekeepers now use plastic foundation coated with a thin layer of beeswax, which is extremely durable and the bees accept it readily once it is properly wax-coated. There is also a growing movement toward foundationless beekeeping, where you give the bees just a starter strip of wax and let them build their own natural comb. This has genuine benefits, but is better attempted once you understand how to read and manage comb, not on your very first hive. Let's talk about what you genuinely do not need to buy as a beginner, because the list is longer than you might expect. You do not need an electric uncapping knife for your first season. A simple serrated bread knife warmed in hot water works perfectly well for uncapping frames at small scale. You do not need a professional-grade honey extractor right away. Many local beekeeping associations have extractors available for members to borrow or rent. Use that option for your first harvest and invest in your own extractor once you know you are committed and you understand what capacity you actually need. You do not need a queen marking kit in your first month. You do not need a frame grip tool, though they are genuinely useful and inexpensive. You do not need a bee brush immediately, though a good soft one costs almost nothing and is worth having. You do not need a second hive in your first week, though having 2 hives is something most experienced beekeepers strongly recommend as soon as you are ready, because it gives you the ability to compare colonies and transfer resources between them. What you do need, and what many beginners skip, is a good reference book. Not a general interest book about bees, but a practical beekeeping manual written by an experienced beekeeper. The Hive and the Honeybee, The Beekeeper's Handbook by Diana Samataro, and Honeybee Democracy by Thomas Seeley are all excellent. Having a reliable reference you can turn to when something unexpected happens inside your hive is genuinely invaluable, especially in your first season when everything is new and sometimes alarming. The last equipment mistake I want to mention is location and hive stand, because these are things beginners often do not think about until they have already made a mistake that is difficult to fix. Your hive needs to be on a level, stable stand that keeps it off the ground. Hives sitting directly on the ground are vulnerable to moisture, to small hive beetles, to skunks, and other animals that scratch at the entrance and harass the bees. A simple stand made from concrete blocks or lumber costs almost nothing and makes a real difference. The hive should be slightly tilted forward so that any water that gets inside drains out through the entrance rather than pooling on the bottom board. Location matters more than most beginners realize. Bees need morning sun to warm the hive and get flying early in the day. They need some afternoon shade in very hot climates to avoid overheating. They need a windbreak on the north and west sides in cold regions to reduce winter heat loss. And they need a flight path that does not send thousands of bees directly through your neighbor's garden or across a frequently used walkway. Think about your hive placement before you set up, because moving an established colony is disruptive and complicated. Get it right from the beginning, and you will save yourself a significant headache later. Equipment is not glamorous. It is not the part of beekeeping that anyone gets excited about. But the right gear, chosen thoughtfully, makes every single aspect of beekeeping easier, safer, and more enjoyable. And the wrong gear, whether too cheap or simply unnecessary, drains your budget and your enthusiasm at exactly the moment when you need both the most. In the final part of this video, we are bringing everything together.
A clear summary of all 5 mistakes, the mindset that separates beekeepers who thrive from those who quit after their first season, and something I want to ask you personally. Do not go anywhere. We have covered a lot of ground in this video, and before we wrap up, I want to bring it all together in a way that actually sticks. Because here is the thing about mistakes in beekeeping.
They are not signs that you are doing it wrong. They are signs that you are doing it. Every beekeeper you have ever admired, every experienced voice you have ever listened to, every person who runs a thriving apiary with dozens of healthy colonies, every single one of them has made these exact mistakes. Most of them have made all 5. Some of them have made all 5 in the same season. The difference between beekeepers who thrive and beekeepers who quit is not talent. It is not money. It is not even experience. It is the willingness to learn from what goes wrong and keep going anyway. So let's do a quick and clear recap of everything we covered today. Mistake number 1 was over-inspecting your hive. Opening the hive too often disrupts temperature, disturbs the chemical communication system the colony depends on, and over time trains your bees to be defensive. The fix is simple. Inspect once every 7 to 10 days during the active season, and learn to read the outside of your hive between inspections. Mistake number 2 was poor smoker technique. Smoke works by triggering a biological survival response in bees, not by calming them in a gentle way. Too much smoke, smoke that is too hot, or smoke applied at the wrong moment makes things worse, not better. Light your smoker properly before you approach the hive. Use cool white smoke in small amounts. Wait 30 seconds after each application, and move slowly and deliberately throughout the inspection. Mistake number 3 was ignoring Varroa mites. Varroa is not a problem you can see coming until it is already serious. Monitor your mite levels regularly using an alcohol wash or sugar roll. Treat when your count reaches 3 mites per 100 bees, and build Varroa management into your seasonal routine the same way you build in inspections and feeding. This single habit will save more colonies than anything else on this list. Mistake number 4 was feeding incorrectly. Use thin syrup in spring, thick syrup in late summer and autumn, and solid sugar or fondant in winter if emergency feeding is needed. Never feed during an active nectar flow. Never feed liquid syrup in cold weather. And remember that feeding is a tool for specific situations, not a substitute for a colony that is properly set up and managed. Mistake number 5 was making the wrong equipment choices. Invest in a quality suit and veil because your safety matters. Choose the right hive system for your situation and your physical ability to manage it. Buy a reliable smoker that will not let you down mid-inspection. And resist the temptation to buy everything at once. Start with what you need, learn what you are doing, and add equipment as your experience and your operation grow. That is the full list. 5 mistakes, 5 clear fixes. Write them down. Put them somewhere you will see them before your next inspection. Now I want to ask you something directly, and I genuinely want to hear your answer in the comments below. Which one of these 5 mistakes hit closest to home for you? Which one made you think, okay, that is exactly what I have been doing? There is no wrong answer, and there is nothing to be embarrassed about. This is a community of people who are all learning, and your honest answer might be exactly what another beginner needs to read today to avoid making the same mistake. If this video gave you something useful, something you will actually take out to your hive and apply, please hit the like button right now. It is the single most effective way to help this channel reach more beekeepers who need this information. And if you are not subscribed yet, do it now. Every week on this channel, we go deep on practical beekeeping topics with honest information and no fluff. You will not regret it. Beekeeping is one of the most rewarding things a person can take on. There is nothing quite like standing in front of a thriving hive that you built from scratch, watching thousands of bees doing exactly what they are supposed to do, knowing that you played a part in that. It is humbling and it is extraordinary at the same time. Stay patient, stay curious, and we will see you in the next video.